one of the most influential, I think, people on Twitter these days. A great person to bring on and to referee Judge Merchan's behavior today, because he used to vet candidates for federal judgeships all the way up to the Supreme Court when he worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's our good friend, Mike Davis, and he joins us right now. Mike, good to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me.
We love having you. We always get wiser when you're on. I want to start with the judge's jury instruction. There's been a lot of moments in this trial where people looked at Judge Merchan and said, what is he up to? But today, if I understand correctly, he basically said, you don't have to agree on what the crime is. If 4 of you see one crime and 4 of you see another and 4 see another, as long as you all agree a crime is committed, that will count as a unanimous verdict. Am I interpreting him right? And is that the normal thing for a judge to do?
You are interpreting that right. And yeah, that's the normal thing for a judge to do if you're a judge in a third world Marxist hellhole like Zimbabwe or North Korea. This is clearly unconstitutional. And this just further evidences that this is a partisan, corrupt, rigged process by these Biden Democrat prosecutors and judge and witness and operatives to railroad President Trump for the non-crime of a businessman settling a nuisance claim and putting it in his private books as a legal expense. I've been a lawyer for nearly 20 years. I don't know what the hell else you would call it other than a legal expense. Apparently, I've been a criminal for 20 years because this is how my clients settle these nuisance claims and put it in their books. And somehow that business bookkeeping misdemeanor for putting a legal expense as a legal expense in your private books in 2017. Somehow that's a business misdemeanor, and somehow that 2017 booking affected the 2016 presidential election. And even though that non-bookkeeping misdemeanor is time barred beyond the statute of limitations, the criminal defendant now has just learned after the trial is over, after all the evidence, after all the arguments, in the jury instructions, that this corrupt Democrat Judge Juan Merchan, who donated to Biden illegally, donated to Biden's campaign, and then his daughter is raising millions of dollars off of this criminal trial over which he is presiding, requiring his recusal. We've learned in these jury instructions by this Juan Merchan, this corrupt judge, that the jury can just pick whatever they want as the second crime. They can pick a New York, a campaign finance violation, a federal campaign finance violation, maybe a conspiracy to influence the election, which is what presidential campaigns and every campaign in world history has done, is conspire to influence the election. So it's amazing. There are a lot of business people and a lot of political candidates who are now criminals under this novel legal theory that Bragg and Colangelo, this Biden operative, and this corrupt judge Juan Merchan have brought to take down President Trump before the election.
Yeah. So well put. There is another standard that he set in instructions that I think probably is beneficial to the president in this respect. He said that you just knowing about the conspiracy is not enough. You need to participate in it. You have to be active in it. Did they provide any evidence that, in fact, if I remember correctly, I think there was some evidence that suggested that Donald Trump wasn't involved in the conspiracy. I think I remember the comptroller saying, Donald Trump didn't tell me to make these payments. That instruction, that high hell that the judge did set for the conspiracy part, that probably is not going to be met by any of the evidence, right?
Well, you would think that if this were a fair trial, but we don't have a fair trial here. There is no crime here, right? There is no crime whatsoever. It's not a crime for a businessman to settle a nuisance claim. It's not a crime for a candidate to collude with others to try to win the election, right? Those aren't crimes. Even if those were somehow crimes, there is no evidence that Bragg and Colangelo presented during this trial that proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump committed any so-called crime, right? So there's no crime, there's no evidence, but that doesn't matter here because we have a partisan, corrupt, rigged process where you have a Soros-funded Manhattan DA who campaigned on getting Trump. You have Matthew Colangelo getting deployed from the Biden Justice Department, a number 3 political appointee in the Biden Justice Department to bring this bogus case that the prior Manhattan DA, the Manhattan U.S. Attorney, the Federal Election Commission, and even Bragg himself, who campaigned on getting Trump, declined to bring because this case is so ridiculous. You have a corrupt judge, again, who donated to Biden, whose daughter's fundraising off of this case. You have these star witnesses, Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen, who have a political axe to grind. They're making money off of this trial. They should be gagged, not Trump. You have Michael Cohen, the star witness, as a serial perjurer, disbarred attorney, convicted felon, and he admitted during this trial he embezzled $60,000 from Trump. And then you have this Manhattan jury that voted 87% for Joe Biden. The jury pool is further rigged by bouncing people who follow Trump on social media, but not Biden. So you already have an 87% Biden jury pool, further rigged. They found the 3 people in Manhattan who follow Trump on social media probably and bounced them. And then you have these jury instructions by this corrupt partisan judge and these partisan prosecutors. You have these jury instructions that make it impossible for President Trump to be found not guilty, right? Like you said, you have a jury instruction that on the second crime, it could be whatever the jurors want, and they don't have to unanimously agree what that second crime is. And they didn't even tell Trump what that second crime was. They didn't tell Trump the legal allegations against him so he can defend himself. This is clearly unconstitutional. It's clearly corrupt. This will get overturned on appeal eventually, even if
there's a lot of reversible error here, isn't there?
Oh, it's a J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, just did a criminal referral to the Justice Department that Garland will do nothing with. But the Biden Justice Department actually needs to pick this up and investigate and prosecute this, because this is a criminal conspiracy by these Biden Democrat prosecutors, this Biden Democrat judge, these Biden Democrat witnesses, and these Biden Democrat operatives to clearly violate Trump's civil rights, his due process rights, his equal protection rights, his First Amendment rights. This judge illegally gagged Trump, unconstitutionally gagged Trump, so he can't speak out about this biased, corrupt, partisan, rigged process. If he does, he goes to jail. If he talks about Lauren Michon or responds to Stormy Daniels or responds to Michael Cohen or talks about Matthew Colangelo getting deployed from the Biden Justice Department, even if he mentions that the jury pool is 87% Biden voters, let alone that it was rigged, right? Trump will go to jail. If his campaign posts a news story from the New York Times mentioning any of those 5 things, for example, Mershon has threatened to throw Trump in prison. He cannot defend himself during this trial, and that is a conspiracy against President Trump's constitutional rights. That's a violation of 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242, a very serious civil rights felony, up to 10 years in prison. And come January 20th, 2025, after the American people put Trump back into the White House on November 5th, the Trump 47 Justice Department must open a criminal probe, as J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, has outlined.
Yeah. The jury just asked the judge to reread portions of David Pecker's testimony about a 2015 Trump Tower meeting and Cohen's testimony about that same meeting. That's kind of important. It gives you some sense of what the jury's focusing in on. I assume they're focusing on, was there enough evidence of a conspiracy? Because those are the 2 places where the prosecutors used the term conspiracy in Pecker's questioning and in Cohen's questioning. Anything to read into that? What do you think when you hear that just happen up in the courthouse?
I agree with you. They're trying to figure out if Trump knew about any of this. But here's the issue. Even if Trump knew, even if Trump authorized it, there's no crime. And that's the issue. That's the problem with this. There's no crime here whatsoever. It's not a crime.
Paying to stop a story is perfectly normal, or to allow anything from coming out. We have non-disclosure agreements all day long, right?
Yes. I mean, I would be aiding and abetting a lot of crimes as an attorney over the last 20 years if it's a crime for a businessman to settle a nuisance claim, or if it's a crime to conspire with others to influence the election. Those are called campaigns.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we have them. All right, I want to go through the scenarios. So one scenario is that the president is acquitted based on what you saw in the courtroom. Is that the best? Is that the proper outcome based on the evidence that the prosecutors presented?
The proper outcome would have been that this judge dismissed these charges at the beginning because there's no crime. There's no evidence that Trump committed any crime, so that the jury should acquit Trump, but they won't, because this is a partisan rigged jury in Manhattan. So at best, you might be able to get one juror who hangs out and hangs the jury, And so, but that means that you would just have a retrial immediately, and Trump is stuck in this dingy New York courtroom for the next 3 months. And so maybe Bragg and Colangelo and Juan Merchan would love it. I mean, Maura Merchan, the judge's daughter, will be able to raise millions and millions of more dollars from another trial. So it's just, look, Trump's not guilty of any crime. There is no crime. I do think they're going to find him guilty because this process is so partisan, corrupt, and rigged.
Yeah, really remarkable. It is a remarkable moment. All right, I want to turn to something else because I mentioned at the top of the show that you do lots of important work at the Article 3 Project. You've done lots of great work in the Senate for so many years. You filed a complaint earlier today against a federal judge, again, applying the same standards that you're applying to Judge Merchan in this analysis. Tell us a little bit about the complaint you filed against U.S. District Judge Michael Ponsner.
So, yeah, Judge Michael Ponsner is a Clinton-appointed judge up in the First Circuit, up in Massachusetts, and he took it upon himself to write a New York Times opinion piece jumping into the middle of this bogus flag controversy surrounding Justice Alito, where the Democrats are trying to use flags that Mrs. Alito flew at their Virginia residence and their New Jersey beach house to say that these flags, one of them was an upside-down American flag, a distress flag, after a neighbor called her the C word after she confronted the neighbor about having an F Trump sign in front of a school bus stop. And so she flew that upside-down distress flag because the neighbor was harassing her. They also had, Mrs. Alito also flew an appeal to heaven flag, George Washington's Revolutionary War flag, at their New Jersey beach house. This is a flag that has been flown for centuries across America, including the city of San Francisco, not exactly MAGA country, has flown this flag. And so I don't understand what the issue is, but the New York Times and these Senate Democrats have cooked up this bogus hoax that Mrs. Alito was somehow flying flags related to January 6th. So therefore, Justice Alito should recuse. That is nonsense. Justice Alito just put out a very powerful letter saying he's not recusing. He's actually obligated not to recuse under the Supreme Court rules because unlike lower federal court judges who are interchangeable and you can swap people out easily with recusal, you can't do that with Supreme Court justices. So there is a strong presumption that Supreme Court justices do not recuse, so you don't play games like the Senate Democrats and the New York Times are playing right now to get Justice Alito to recuse on Trump's presidential immunity case that's going to be decided around the end of June, and the Fisher case for January 6th defendants before that likely. And so Justice Alito properly said that my wife thinks for herself. She flew her own flags. They're not related to January 6th. I'm not recusing. Piss off, as he should have. And I filed a judicial misconduct complaint against this Judge Ponsner for writing he ghost wrote. Apparently he decided to take upon himself to go write an opinion piece in the New York Times criticizing and smearing Justice Alito for in the middle of this fake political scandal, and that's highly inappropriate for judges to get involved in politics, to make extrajudicial statements like that, especially when cases are pending like they are with the Trump case and the Fisher case before the Supreme Court. And I wanted to send a message to this judge to keep his mouth shut outside of the courtroom and stay out of the political arena.
And it's very important. So Justice Alito's wife enjoys the full extent of the First Amendment. She didn't give it up because her husband got confirmed to the Supreme Court. But a federal judge does have restrictions on their speech to ensure their fairness. So there's a very different standard that would be applied to a Judge Ponsner versus a chief or a Supreme Court justice's wife. Describe a little bit of the responsibility that a jurist has in making sure that they don't cross the line with their speech.
That's exactly right. And I don't remember this Massachusetts judge writing a New York Times opinion piece when Chief Judge David Barron on the First Circuit has a wife who goes on CNN as a Democrat talking head and talks about issues before the First Circuit over which her husband presides. I don't remember this judge in Massachusetts criticizing Ruth Bader Ginsburg when she wore her dissent collar after Trump won, or many other times that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has weighed in on these political issues. It seems like this Judge Posner in Massachusetts has a political agenda, and when he does these extrajudicial statements like he did in the New York Times, he brings this scrutiny upon himself, and so now he's going to have to deal with my judicial misconduct complaint from the Article 3 project.
Very important, and also a great example of highlighting all the different forms of hypocrisy that seem to emerge in this extraordinary town called Washington. There's so much hypocrisy. You've done a good job highlighting it all. Mike, we love all the work you do. What's the best way for people to stay in touch with the Article 3 project and all the great work you do? I'm a daily follower of your great Twitter feed, so a lot of good places, but what's the best way?
I appreciate that, John. Article3project.org, article number 3project.org. You can take action there. You can donate there. You can follow us on social media there. Thank you very much.
Great to have you on, my friend. Thanks for refereeing all these complex